Welcome back to This Day in Irish History. I'm your host, Raymond Welsh. Before we dive into today's story, if you'd like to explore other significant events that happened on this day in Irish history, visit thisdayirishhistory.com. The link is in the episode description. Now, let's journey back to March 21st, 1831, when tensions erupted in the town of Graiguenamanagh during the infamous Tithe War. The Tithe War was not a conventional war, but rather a sustained campaign of resistance, sometimes violent, against the compulsory payment of tithes to the Church of Ireland. Though Catholics made up the vast majority of Ireland's population, they were still required to financially support the Protestant established church, a practice that had long been a source of anger and resentment. By the early 19th century, economic hardship and growing nationalist sentiment had intensified opposition to the tithe system. Tenant farmers and rural communities began organising to resist the payments, refusing to hand over what they saw as an unjust tax. This defiance led to brutal enforcement measures by the authorities, who often seized property, particularly livestock, as a form of payment. It was against this backdrop that events unfolded in Graiguenamanagh on March 21st, 1831. On that day, a detachment of 120 police officers moved into the town, tasked with seizing cattle from local farmers who had refused to pay the tithe. Their presence was a provocation, a stark reminder of the Crown's determination to uphold a system that many saw as a relic of colonial oppression. The reaction from the townspeople was swift and furious. As news of the police action spread, locals gathered in resistance, determined to protect their property and stand against what they perceived as state-sanctioned theft. Tithe seizures often sparked violent confrontations, and while historical records do not indicate a full-scale battle in Graiguenamanagh that day, the sheer force used by the authorities suggests that tensions ran high. Similar incidents across the country had already turned deadly. Just a few months earlier, in December 1830, a major clash in Carrickshock, County Kilkenny, had resulted in the deaths of at least 12 police officers and several protesters, further escalating the conflict. These violent encounters underscored the deep-seated anger felt by the Irish Catholic population and the lengths to which they were willing to go in defiance of an unjust system. The resistance in Graiguenamanagh was part of a broader movement that made the continued enforcement of tithes increasingly untenable. Despite the government's attempts to crack down on protesters, public opposition only grew stronger. By the mid-1830s, the British administration realised that the tithe system had become unworkable. In 1838, after years of unrest, the system was effectively dismantled with the passage of the Tithe Commutation Act. This legislation shifted the burden of payment from tenants to landlords, which significantly reduced its impact on the majority of the population. The events of March 21st, 1831 may not be as widely remembered as some of the bloodier clashes of the Tithe War, but they are emblematic of the persistent struggle of the Irish people against economic injustice and religious discrimination. The resistance in Graiguenamanagh and other towns demonstrated the power of collective action and foreshadowed later movements that would challenge British rule in Ireland. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Ireland's rich past. Please like and subscribe, and until next time, I'm Raymond Welsh. Slán go fóill.